Welcome to Constructive Thinking, a podcast by the Progressive Contractors Association of Canada. I'm Karen Renkema, Vice President of Ontario, and I'm joined by Kevin McCarthy, the head of corporations and institutions for Enriched Academy. And today we're talking about financial wellness and financial literacy and what that means for the construction industry. Hi, Kevin. Good morning.
Good morning, Aaron.
Thanks for being with us today. I'm going to let Kevin introduce himself a little bit, but before he does, with us today is Kevin McCarthy, and he's with Enriched Academy, a PCA member that is helping some of our contractors as well as their workers find a pathway to A, be more productive, but B, finding real employee wellness. But Kevin, before we get into Enriched Academy and the important service that you provide, why don't you give us a little bit about you and how you got here today?
Sure. Thanks, Karen. My name is Kevin McCarthy. I've been with Enriched for almost 8 years now. I live in Burlington, Ontario, married, 3 kids. Before I joined Enriched, I worked at Scotiabank for about 5 years in Toronto. And before that, 8 years in Ottawa. I was actually working for Jim Flaherty, the former finance minister, as a policy advisor. And then the last couple of years as chief of staff. And one of the policy files I had when I worked for Minister Flaherty was the financial literacy file. And that was something that he cared a lot about. As a result, I started caring a lot about. And so this role really came about. A friend of mine, Kevin McCarthy, started this startup financial literacy company and was kind of hounding me to join him. And about 7 years ago, I took the plunge and joined.
Well, in a nod to Minister Flaherty at that time, I don't think financial literacy was really top of mind for many. It was just kind of probably around 10 to 15 years ago where all of a sudden that discussion really took place that we've got to do more about this. And yeah, it's been a steep mountain to get out of probably, decades of that curriculum not being in school and it not being offered to individuals. So why don't we get to how Enriched came about to kind of fill that void in the marketplace on financial literacy?
Sure. Yeah. Enriched is, for those who don't know, we're a modular-based online program teaching financial literacy to kids, but financial wellness as well to adults. And really the way we started about 20 years ago wasn't planning to be a company. As I mentioned, my friend Kevin Cochran is the co-founder, and his story is really Enriched's start story. He finished high school, and within 2 years, still living at home, working kind of retail jobs, he found himself $20,000 in credit card debt. He just didn't know how money worked. He actually, if you believe it, bought his first car with a credit card, not understanding what the minimum payments would mean and how he'd never really get out of that debt. He was fortunate. He met a mentor. That mentor got him into a sales training role, which was really his sweet spot, but also taught him about money, taught him about the savings and investing, and encouraged him to give back. And the way Kevin gave back was he started going to his old high school to teach kids about money, not planning to build a business, not planning to do anything other than give back to these kids to teach them what he didn't learn himself. And over the course of 5, 6 years, giving hundreds of these talks, he started having parents come up to him and say, "Hey, were you the one who spoke at my daughter's school? Because she just asked to take back all her Christmas gifts and buy index stocks. And how did you do that in half an hour?" And so he began to see that there was a real need here. And so him and his business partner, James Seabrook, filmed the talk. It was originally a series of DVDs, if you recall those. They got on the show Dragon's Den, which was a great break for them. They got a couple deals with 2 of the dragons, and then moved beyond DVDs, moved online, and then started working with companies. And that's really how Enriched was found and how we're growing from that constantly.
So take me a little bit back to starting in schools and that process, then recognizing that, yes, we're educating our young, but why going to kind of corporate Canada and, whether it's a contractor or whether it's a corporation? I know that you work with a number of very large corporations across Canada. Why the jump from education to now the adult world? Why is that so important for corporate Canada, but why did Enriched see that void?
Yeah, great question. So as I said, we started with education. So it was a high school program originally. And when I came in, that was really what I focused on. So we built up the high school program, and then post-secondary program was also something that we focused on. So for the first 4 years that I worked here, it was strictly education that I focused on. We now have partnerships with the government of Alberta, government of PEI, and the Toronto District School Board and such in the K-12 space. And then we also work with about 40 or 50 post-secondary institutions, mainly trade schools and career colleges. I think the practical nature of what we do fits with them. But as you mentioned, we've moved into the adult space as well. And a big realization was, kids don't understand money. Partly it's the school's fault, but partly their parents don't understand money and can't pass that money, can't pass that knowledge on to their kids. And so that was a realization for us. Hey, there's a much bigger need out there that we can meet. And so we started working. Actually, again, it's almost by accident. So we were working with TransUnion, one of the credit monitoring agencies, and she said, "Hey, do you guys ever work with police? Because my husband's a cop, and they make some good money, but they really don't know anything about their money." And so we got invited to speak to a police conference, and we started working with police. And now we work with well over 20 police associations, the RCMP, the OPP, the BC Police, really across the country. And then that just sort of kind of grew to other corporations and unions and trade unions and stuff like that, because the number one stress for Canadians is finances.
So the corporate world, just, maybe you can give me a couple examples, but how has it been with the corporate world recognizing that you create a more productive workplace when you take out the financial stress? But how has that kind of grown? And talk a little bit maybe of an example of a corporation that you're working with now or that you worked with in the past that really embraced that and recognized that within its employee base.
Yeah, so I really think this is becoming many ways like mental health support for the corporate world. So if I take myself back in my career when I started 25 years ago, there were no supports for mental health. It just didn't exist. Now you can't really join a company where they don't have some sort of mental health supports. And I really think that's the way it's going to be in 10, 15 years with financial wellness. And so that really is kind of the bridge that corporations are starting to see, is that, yes, we've got good support for mental health and things like that, but we've got this gap when it comes to financial wellness. And that's really where companies and unions work with us, because they realize that they have this gap. Financial stress, as I mentioned, is the number one stress for Canadians. 41% of people identify as financially stressed. And when they are financially stressed, they spend time. They're not as productive. They're not as focused on the job. It's frankly not as safe for them on the job because they're dealing with the stress of money and debt and things like that. So that's really where the focus has come into for us. And there's a number of corporations that I can think of. Martin Rea, which is an auto parts company here, global auto parts company, actually founded in Canada, but has locations in Canada, US, and Mexico, Germany. But they've been working with us for 2.5 years now here in Canada, and very proactive. They've seen that, their view was like, if we can help our people manage their money better, that will help us. We can't always give a raise, but we can help them manage their money better, which gets at the root cause of what they're dealing with. And so we're meeting with them on the floor plants. We're doing events for them at all their factories. And in fact, things have gone so well that we just actually opened in the US to support them. So we just created some content, American content, and opened for the first time in the US to support their American workers.
Is it more of a, we look at employee wellness plans that are connected to benefits, and it's kind of just a passive approach. By the way, Kevin, this is available to you if you need it. And it's not really in your face. And so sometimes the uptake on those type of benefit programs, give and take, sometimes they're high, but generally not when it's passive like that. I mean, how best is this utilized? Is it more of a in-your-face mandated for employees to take part of it, or is it passive, or do you have both approaches that you use?
So we have both approaches in terms of the companies we work with, but we really recommend a more proactive approach to, and our best companies like Martin Rea, but like the OPP and others, some of the construction unions that we work with take that proactive approach. And so Martin Rea, for example, every year, twice a year, they have us come on their factory floors, all 18 of their plants here in Canada, and we talk about some issue when it comes to money. So one time it was the RSPs, and explaining that Martin Rea is actually increasing their matching amount, and that's free money for the employees. We saw a dramatic spike in take up in that program. We've also talked about our financial coaching. So we have coaches that will meet with individual employees. Every partner of ours, all their employees get financial coaching. And again, we are unbiased. I don't think I've mentioned that, but we're not affiliated with a bank. So the advice that they were getting is very different than, say, if they went into a Scotiabank or a Sun Life or something like that. There's no intent on our coaches to sell them something. We just want to find the best advice. So our approach is more proactive. We have organizations that have mandated this into the apprenticeship training. For example, one of the Carpenters Union. If you become an apprentice there, you have to take Enriched Academy, and that's planting that seed of financial literacy, financial wellness early on in an apprentice career.
And in that case, with the Carpenters Union, is it an in-person course, or it's able to be shared digitally or online?
Yeah, so we essentially have three pillars to what we offer. We have our online platform, so that's available. It's modules. It's basically what you should have learned in high school but didn't about money. So that's available 24/7 self-paced learning. So that's great for some people. We also do live events. So we have weekly webinars on different topics that interest folks when it comes to money. But we'll also do live in-person events because some people, that's the best way that they learn. And then finally, the third pillar is our financial coaching. That really brings it all together. Again, having somebody to bounce something off. Again, they're not trying to sell you something. They're just looking out for your best interest and giving you some education and advice on where you're going with your finances.
I want to now dive deep at, this is constructive thinking about the construction industries, but we touched a little bit on the Carpenters Union. But I wonder if we can speak a little bit about the importance for the construction industry. I'll just share a quick story, and it's one that I hear from numerous contractors, regardless of whether they're in Alberta, Ontario, or BC, is I hired an apprentice, they get to their third or fourth year, all of a sudden they get the salary bump in their third or fourth year. And the first thing they do is go buy the $80,000 pickup truck. And it is so frustrating for employers because they can't say, well, you can't do that. But they also recognize that that's probably not the best decision for that apprentice at that time to start their career in debt before they've even actually achieved journey person status, quite frankly. And not that, Enriched is going to solve the problem of the $80,000 pickup truck, but maybe you have an example about a tradesperson or about somebody specifically in the construction industry and how this has made kind of a difference in that individual's life or with the union.
Yeah, great question. A great example, because we hear this all the time, right, in the construction field, and also, frankly, with the police as well. We always joke that we know who the rookie officer is because they've got the brand new pickup truck and in the drive or in the parking lot. So yeah, we have lots of examples. One example is right in our program. Bruce Croxon, he was the Dragon's Den who kind of signed the deal with us, and we've got him filmed and he used to work on the oil sands when he was first starting out. And he talks about the time that they had so much money they didn't really know what to do, and everybody decided to buy fur coats, and they needed to have fur coats. And suddenly he realized he bought the fur coat, and he's like, why do I need a fur coat? But they just had so much money. They were buying trucks, they were buying toys and things like that. And so he gives that example of like really just kind of waking up and saying, I don't need a fur coat, and just starting to be intentional about his money and saving his money. And so we see that all the time. We see the tradesperson who's worked for 10, 15 years, made very good money, and has nothing to show for it. They're still living paycheck to paycheck because they haven't understood, haven't learned how to save, invest, and live within their means. And so that's, those are very common examples that we see. That's one of the biggest things we see with construction workers is that they just need to manage their money a little better and learn what to save. The other example I would give is we see lots of examples of people it kind of is very sad, 40 or 50 years old, raiding their RRSPs to live their lifestyle for whatever they need. And they don't understand the tax implications of paying 50% marginal tax on that money that they're pulling out. They're essentially robbing their retirement for their current lifestyle. And so that's, again, a education that we work with companies to and unions to educate their employees on this.
Yeah, in the construction industry, and you've talked about working with a number of unions, but PCA employers have a very unique relationship. Our specific employers have a very unique relationship with their union. And I think your business partner, Kevin, was just at our conference speaking about this as well. But I think our employers have shown a great degree of interest in actually being involved in this, not just leaving it to the union, like getting involved and providing something for their employees here. And I'm going a bit off script from what we talk about, but can you talk about how that service offering looks and like the threshold of, how many employees that you need and how that may work with a company if you entered in a construction company and kind of the journey that would take relationship?
So most of our partners typically have 200 employees or more. So we go up to as much as 9,000 with the OPP, for example. But 200 is kind of the threshold where we can truly provide value and support to that organization. And essentially, once we do that, we launch with the company. They get all the things that I've talked about in terms of all of their employees get the online portal access. All of their family members as well get access to that. They have access to the webinars and they have access to the live events and the coaching. But really, the best model that we see is because we work with unions, we also work with management, but when they work together, that is by far the best model because you have everybody supporting this. You have cost sharing involved as well, but you have both messages coming from leadership of the union and of management that this is actually really important for folks. I don't think, I'll be honest, I've worked in finance all my life. Until I joined Enriched, I did not realize how, money affected people as much as it did. It was in my first year working with one of our career colleges, and a woman came up to me after my presentation and said, your program has changed my life. And I was like, at first, I was like, that's a bit much. But then she explained how she had no plan with money. She would just go to Costco, was the example she used, and go in with a certain list and then end up spending $600. I think we can all relate to that.
Yeah.
But then she said, this course actually gave me hope and gave me a plan, and I'm sticking to it, and it's changed her life. And I had two other people that same day tell me the same thing, that this program had changed. And so that's when I realized the amount of stress and despair that results as finance. And that was like 7 years ago. It's only gotten worse with everything that's going on with the grocery costs, the cost of gas. It's a real crisis of cost of living, and that's really what we're trying to help with.
Yeah, you probably have the stats better than I about Canadians being the second or third most indebted individuals in the Western world. Something like that, but it's
just past the. Everyone sort of criticizes the U.S. They spend too much. We've just in the last 2 years passed them in terms of indebtedness on a per person basis.
Yeah. I want to just kind of go back one more thing, just that your relationship, as you talked about the importance of the joint relationship between the employer and the union. Can you talk a little bit about, you've obviously interacted with different governments as you've provided curriculum for different public school boards. But have you seen a situation, or can you give an example, or what is your thought process on how government might actually support further than just kind of like the K-12 or even post-secondary? How can government kind of interact? Why is it in government's best interest as well to interact with that employer, union, like a tripartite relationship between the three to make this important? And is there a pathway there?
Yeah, look, I think this is all, frankly, about leadership and leadership in terms of wanting the best for either your employee or your citizen and things like that. We haven't taught, like, I don't know about you, but I didn't learn about anything about money in school. And that's the vast majority of people that we deal with, and that they haven't learned that. And so we are in discussions, quite far along discussions with one provincial government in terms of a program that would help employees as well, because they are seeing the numbers of exactly what we're talking about here, financial stress and lack of productivity. So this government is probably the most proactive that I've seen. And so I do see a path. I see a path where the governments are realizing, hey, this is a real problem, not just with K-12, because numerous governments are addressing that, but actually with our working population and understanding finances. And I think there would be a real change within the country if more of the government, stood up and understood that. But even without government support, we're seeing great work with management, with leadership. I'll give you one example. We work with the Canadian military a bit, supporting the troops and the great work that they do. And when we started that agreement, we talked to the senior leadership at the military, and we said, how would you judge success from this program? Like, is it usage? Is it what? And she actually paused, thought about it for a bit, and said, last year we had 4 suicides. Not all related to money, but finance was a factor in some of them. If we save one person's life, this program is worth it. And that's really the heart. I'm trying to emphasize, but people are really struggling right now with finances. Again, war in Iran is happening. The gas prices, grocery prices, tariffs. And so there's a real onus, I would say, on companies and unions and government, as you mentioned, to find some solutions to this. And we're excited when we work with organizations where we have both the union and management on side and really believing and pushing this issue.
Agreed. And you mentioned stress. You mentioned a number of different stresses and unproductive. I mean, many are familiar in the construction industry around the conversation about substance abuse, mental wellness. It's almost like a chicken and egg question sometimes, whether it's the financial stress that's leading to that or those leading to the financial stress. But it's an all-in-one. It's all-encompassing. You can't look at one without really dynamically addressing the other as well. Kevin, thank you very much for your time. Do you have anything else you want to leave the audience with today?
No, it's similar to what I've just been emphasizing. I think this is a real chance for companies to lead. I was very encouraged. I was last week from when we're recording this at the PCA event, and there was a ton of interest from PCA members in helping their employees with this. And it really is a leadership issue. You can't always give raises to match the cost of inflation. And that's actually not the root cause. I mean, money is obviously a factor, but understanding what you're doing with your money. And so this is a program, this is education that can really change lives and help lives. And that's really what we would love to work with your members more in the construction industry and really support the work that they're already doing.
And obviously you're available, the broader construction industry, we have many listeners in the broader construction industry and the industry space as well, like natural resources. And you would be more than happy to have conversations with them. I have one more quick question that's come to me as I was having this discussion last night around the dinner table. Do you have the monopoly on this in the... I mean, we're all about competition at PCA, but we were just trying to think around the dinner table last night. I'm not sure that there's anything that looks or smells like Enriched across Canada.
No, we're pretty unique, and we're proudly unique. The biggest difference, I'd say, is, again, we're not sponsored by a financial institution. And so that is, there are, the CBA has some programs, and again, all good programs, they teach the right thing, but there's always a sort of catch, like, hey, buy this credit card or get this bank account and things like that. So what we do is fairly unique, is unique in Canada, and we're proud of that.
That's great. I've really, really enjoyed over the past 6 months learning about Enriched. I've really enjoyed the time we've spent together, Kevin, over the past 6 months and meeting Kevin Cochran as well. But you can always reach out to PCA. To me, I can get you in contact with Kevin, or you can find Enriched on the World Wide Web, I think. Thank you so much for your time today, Kevin.
Thanks a lot, Karen.
The opinions expressed expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent or the program host.